Right. So, we are in our next chapter of book club. We've been gone the last couple of weeks, but we're about to start the second half of this book that we've been reading over the last 5 weeks, and it's called "Why Do I Do What I Don't Want to Do?" And so, we're starting the second part. Now, to kind of set it up, the first part was really all about how this kind of, he talks about the seven deadly sins. So, he looked at five of those. And we looked at lust, we looked at greed, we looked at, I think it was apathy, and pride, and different things. We looked at how do we get rid of those things. Anger was the other one. So, how do we take on those things in our life? Where do we find those things in our heart? Why do we find those things? And then we looked at the opposite of that, because you can't, as this book's taught us, you can't just get rid of that. You can't just kind of buckle down and go, oh, well, I'm not going to have anger today. That's not how it works. We have to replace it with something. And so we get to the second part of the book, and these are what he calls the modern challenges, the modern wars that we have. And so, kind of to set it up before we get the guys in here, he talks about how that so often we say we want to go all in with Jesus. We want to um, live a life completely devoted for Christ, but we just don't want to let go of something. Maybe it's a relationship status, maybe it's something in our life, busyness, something, stuff, physically stuff, something in our life, a relationship, something that is causing us to go, Jesus, you can have everything but this one area. And he says in here, he says, we find ourselves drawn to the modern comforts, the trinkets, and the pleasures that the world has to offer. And I wrote in next to that that those become a problem when they begin to pull us away from God. And so, as we look through these next five things over the next 5 weeks, we're going to look at what those things are. And in the same way as we've done before, how do we replace those with something else? He goes on to give this illustration from Scripture when Jesus comes to have an interaction with this rich young ruler, and it's across three different gospels. And this interaction that this young wealthy man comes up to Christ and he says, what must I do to be saved? And so Jesus first kind of gives him the list of the commandments that God's given, and you should do this, you should honor your father and mother, and do all these things. And this rich man goes, yes, I've done all those things, I've kept those things since I was a child. And you can kind of hear his passion and his confidence that he's been good, that he's a good man. And then Jesus says, now, to inherit the kingdom of earth, or inherit the kingdom of heaven, you should sell all of your belongings and come and follow me. And the rich young ruler walks away sad, because he had great wealth, Jesus says. And he the part that kind of stuck out to me is he was talking about the story was when his disciples, towards the end of verse 26 or so, said, well, then who can then be saved? That they were just blown away that if this rich guy, right, in that culture and in that time, to have wealth meant that you were blessed by God, meant that God was had shined His face upon you, that you've been blessing, which in a lot of ways would have interpreted to holiness, that you had been blessed because you were good, because you were holy, because you were righteous, because you were living the right way. God had blessed you. And so to them, when they see this wealthy young man walk away from Jesus, and they're looking at it going, well, then how can anybody be saved? If this guy can't be, how can anybody? And Jesus' lesson as a part of it, he says, with this man, with man, this is impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God. That it's not the heart, or it's not the actions that we look at, but the heart, that commitment, that devotion to Christ. Do we truly make him our Lord and our Savior and give all to him when we ask for the forgiveness, or do we hold things back? And so, as we kind of go through this next couple of chapters, that's going to be kind of the challenges. These are things that we deal with in the modern time. The previous things were things that we've dealt with since the beginning, since Adam and Eve. And then now we're going to look at some modern wars, some challenges in our own life that are going to be difficult. So we're going to get the guys in. Corey may not quite be in just yet. Oh, wait a second. There we go. Oh, he is in. My man. All right. So we're gonna get you guys in, and we're gonna talk about it. So perception management and authenticity. Perception management, authenticity. Now, would you have said walking into this chapter that you have an issue with perception management? Is that something you would have felt like you struggle with, or no? Because I would have said no for me. But then as I was reading, as I do all these chapters, I'm like, oh dang it! I guess I do have a bigger struggle than I thought. What about y'all though? Kind of walking into it, what was your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of the same. I didn't initially think it was one of the higher throws for me.
Eric, Corey?
How about you give me what your definition of perception management is versus authenticity?
Okay. Well, gosh, I don't usually. I ask the questions around here, man, for good
So
reason.
thanks for joining my my Twitch stream.
Um,
Uh,
perception management would have just been for me like how people see you,
okay,
and like how it's the do I let people in? Like, do I let people see what I want them to see, or do I let them people see me? And I'll kind of give
okay,
some examples as we go through this about how I used to live and how um, that's really been more of a struggle than I probably thought it has been in my life, and even I would consider wise counsel that was given to me told me to not live in the way that this book is describing. So, um,
yeah, because I guess I thought I guess somewhat the same way. My interpretation was how much of an effort do I put in making sure that people see me a certain way? Like how
mhm.
much effort how much time am I dedicating to making sure that everyone that I know is going to see me this way that I want to portray them to see me as.
Yeah. I think for me it's a lot of like I know what it doesn't look like. Or I've met people, especially in the business world, that you can tell, and then when you get to know them, it's really evident that how they are one way in at work, and then you can get like that. That's not who you really are at all.
Yeah.
Like, they get in front of important people or whatever. So that was probably what was going in my mind as I was started that chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I don't really go out of my way to trick people or whatever, but I feel like I'm pretty authentic in my at church and at work, and people know my personality. I tend to not offer information out just freely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess that could be a form of un inauthentic
Inauthenticity.
inauthenticity.
Yeah. We're gonna screw that word a bunch tonight. Well, and we'll talk about that specifically because that was I made
Yeah.
some notes on that as we got into later in the book. And kind of his whole point at the beginning was, and kind of he puts us at the top of 125 before we kind of get into the first part of it was that when he looks at kids at Baylor, right, which is really funny because I have the same thoughts. Some of it was I went to DBU and everybody joked that we were the small Baylor, but that he looks at these people and kind of the illustration that's given is all these people are dressed up. He doesn't go there, but he goes to breakfast with a guy and all these people are dressed up looking like they came from church. And the guy goes, well, yeah, some of them came from church and are now eating a late breakfast. And then some of them got dressed up solely to come here to make them people think they went to church. And his statement is that's exhausting. Carefully crafting an image, making sure that you are upholding or looking like you're upholding a certain standard that people have for you, and managing how others perceive you is a terrible hobby. And I just wrote next to that how I have struggled with that over the years, as a pastor and as a Christian. That is like that hit me right away to go, oh man, like I've had some really bad years of this, of trying to portray an image. As a part of it. So I'm really curious to get y'all's opinion. As a pastor, that's a huge deal and it's a huge challenge for me. So I'm very curious as people who live everyday lives in and around non-believers, do you feel that weight and that pressure as much as like I do being on a stage and being kind of supposed to being the spiritual perfect one or whatever. You know what I mean? That sometimes people think. So okay, so we get to this idea of the brand manager. What were some things that kind of stood out to you as a part of this?
I didn't really have much
Okay.
noted in this section, but
Hmm.
I'm just glancing through it on 126. That it says, "Here's the irony that we live inauthentic lives because we want to be liked."
Uh huh.
Um, yeah, that's true. at certain levels in certain aspects of life, and I kind of the motto in the corporate world is fake it until you make it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so like, do you want to, like you were saying earlier, when you're important in front of important people at work, you're putting on your best foot forward to make a good impression for future promotions and stuff like
Right.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, how about you, Brandon, Corey? Is this something that you've seen in your own lives too?
I think
Uh,
probably at times. Go ahead, Corey.
Well, I was just say, I don't know. I guess I don't know. My parents were, for me, always authentic. The business side. My dad obviously is a business guy, but I didn't really see much of his business side. But the interactions with his people that he saw at random events that he works with. I mean, he never seemed like a version of my dad
Right.
I'm not used to. Like he didn't
That's
seem
good.
any different. He seemed like the same kind of guy.
Yeah, that's good. So you had a good example growing up.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's huge. Brandon, you could say kind of the same for you, like not really a huge deal.
Yeah, I'm sure there's times where I catch myself trying to be my own brand manager, and kind of what Eric was saying. If especially in the professional world, you want to be thought of as skilled. You want to be thought of as successful, as efficient, all those things. So probably in maybe more insecure times, I heighten that up and try
Mm-hmm.
to put on that perception.
Yeah. And for me, it was I put on here. I highlighted that part actually that Eric talked about, but for me, it was also on 125. I said each of us is in a cultivate, or each of us is cultivating the image we want others to have of us on a daily basis. And then I kind of went down a little bit further and circled just the veneer of authenticity. Um, and I, for me, that's been the struggle, right? Is this idea of veneer of authenticity, that some of the advice I got, right, from my granddad, who is one of the godliest men I know, loves the Lord, and some of his advice early on was, as a pastor, to be careful and to not let people get too close, because so often in church people try and hurt you. And so there was this, for the first 20 years of ministry almost, there was this veneer that I would put up, and this like barrier I would put up from people, and whether intentionally or unintentionally, that what they would get is the more polished John and a little bit faker John, and not a John that would be that open and honest other than when it suited me, right, to draw in somebody when I'm speaking or things like that. I'll share stories, but ultimately I'm not talking about anything that's happening right now. It's years before, like I've overcome all these things. And so for me, it was this idea that I had to present myself as good and righteous and holy so that people would trust me as a pastor. Does that kind of make sense?
Mhm.
Um, and so that was heavy. I mean, that was really difficult early on, because everything that I struggled with, I just kept silent. I kept silent the doubts. I kept silent, the sexual sin struggles. I kept silent all of the things that were a challenge to me. And since I've come to our current church, that's been something that I've really been kind of encouraged to. There's a culture of authenticity amongst the staff. And so we have staff that I would look up to spiritually, but that they're really honest and they're really open and they're human, and that has helped me to go, okay, I can trust people. And then you start to let people in, and he talks about right below what Eric said, and he goes, in actuality, it's the most likable people are the authentic ones. We're drawn to people who are comfortable in their own skin. And I would say that now that's, I'm so much more there. And I think that's something that I often get from people is, oh, well, you don't seem like a pastor. Like, all right, that's like one of the best compliments I could get, because I know I'm not going off the walls crazy, but that it's like, oh, you seem normal. Like, you don't seem like the buttoned up Catholic priest with the collar on that we can't approach. Like, you seem normal and down to earth. And I've feel like I've presented that more and more, and it's just cool to see how God's kind of used that to go, yeah, that's actually what people want. So, Okay, so then we go on to this idea of when you fear people. And again, y'all may not have much on this whole thing. This may just be a John struggle, so that's okay too. Um, did anything stick out on this idea of the fear of people?
Not really for me.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I would say I struggle with this. Like, why do I care so much about what a particular person thinks about me versus what God thinks about me? It's like once we're caught up in the game of perception management, it's easy to remove God from the equation altogether. Because it's like, I don't know, I struggle with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually reminds me. One thing I did think of, it's not necessarily that I fear what people think of me, but I think in reading through this, I don't fear enough how God views me.
Yeah.
I think is what I got out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's really good one. I highlighted down here. We can't serve Jesus and serve the opinion of others at the same time. That those two things do not go hand in hand. And so often I fall on the side of, well, what would people think rather than, well, what would Jesus, like, what would a Jesus desire of me? Not what do people desire of me. And I think that plays out, like, for me, I think it plays out in a whole lot of different ways. It plays out obviously in like the way I'm honest and open with people, but even in like my time I spend at work, that there are times where I spend way too much time at work because I need people. I want people to think that I'm a hard worker. I want people to think that I'm super committed and I'm super spiritual. So I'm up at the church at 11 p.m. working on something. Like, no, like there's this balance of sacrificing my family and working hard for the Lord, and often if I'm sacrificing my family, it's always because I want people to appreciate me. I want people to notice it. I want people to go, oh, he's clearly loves the Lord so much because he's sacrificing his family for the call. Like that's the fear of people that I think I struggle with.
Yeah, Brandon, that was good what you said. Like we don't think enough of what God thinks about it. Myself, I don't really care what people think of me in a lot of situations, and I think that's been more true. I think probably for everybody as you get older and older. They always say, "Oh, people don't give a crap."
I was just thinking, we are all getting older. That definitely helps as a part of this.
But I think that's a good mindset to shift towards. Is how does God perceive the situation, and what does Scripture say about it? I think we got to have that more in our forefront of our minds more often.
Yeah. Okay, so then we get over to this next part, this truly deadly sin. It just talks about the harm that this sin does, and he gives the example of Ananias and Sapphira, and just how their desire to be loved by other people ultimately was the cause of death in their own lives, which is a really harsh story in the Bible. Like it's a pretty, that's like the most Old Testament story we get in the New Testament is that one right there, and it's just okay, boom, dead. All right. Next, wife. All right, dead. We move on. They just take them out and they bury them. Like it is what it is. So what stood out to you guys, if anything, in here?
I'm sure other people highlighted this too, but it says I messed it up. Inauthenticity always harms the people closest to us. That's something that really kind of stood out. Like it's not just you that you're messing up; it's also everybody that's around you as well, the ones that are closest to you.
Yeah. Well, so I think for me, where I saw it in the business world, was, and I'll use the whatever acronym, and then I'll edit it for family friendly, but the CYA approach to life, right? The cover your butt thing to go, okay, no, my job is to protect myself. Like it's only my only thing that matters is that I protect myself. And I think that goes to the fear of people and the fear of not how you're viewed. And like you said, I think Eric, you were saying like trying to impress the right people at the right time and all that sort of stuff. And when all that's doing is it's harming the relationships of the other people around you. I had a lady one time that I had my boss call me, and I was building a new website for him, and I was working during the day in the office, and I'd come home, and I work best like middle of the night, so I went like from 11 p.m. till 3 or 4 a.m. just like coding and doing all this sort of stuff, and I was just working like crazy trying to get this thing done. Well, because I wasn't in the office at 7:30 in the morning when the office opened, and because I didn't walk through the front door, I walked through a side door. She went to the CEO of the company to complain about me. Um, and he called me and he was like, "Man, I'm sorry." He said, "I know you're working hard. Just try to be in the office a little bit more." He said, "Maybe work a little bit less at nights." He said, "I know you're doing it, but it's causing a problem." But you know what? I didn't like that lady, and when she got let go, I wasn't that sad. Um, and it's just the idea of like that hurt our relationship. Is I didn't trust her anymore. I didn't want to be around her because this. And maybe that was authentic to her and
I was
who
about
she
to say she's
was.
being
She
authentic.
probably was being authentic, but that she was, I don't know, it's just this fear of somebody else and all sorts of stuff. It just, I don't know, it caused this rift. And I feel like it's not just family, which is kind of his illustration here is family, but that it's also the people you have at work, the people, your relationships with people is when they realize you're not authentic, they don't really want to be around you. They don't trust you anymore. They don't care what your voice is. They just kind of toss you out.
Mm.
Anybody else got anything from that part? That's kind of a shorter part.
Mm.
All right, so
Just
we get.
that,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, just the little sentence about if you believe there's a God, then you know He knows the whole truth. Just knowing you can't hide anything from God, and
Mm-hmm.
just that story about these Ananias and Sapphira. I'm sure all of us have done worse things
Oh yeah.
than they did, and God took them out for it. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we talk all the time. I mean, even in this series of, like, God already knows. You might as well go tell him the truth. He already knows what you're thinking. He already knows what you're feeling. He already knows what you're gonna do before you do it. So you might as well be honest with him about it. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so this next section is talking about this like whitewashed tombs, and we start to kind of get towards the good side of it. But I had a couple of highlights in this one. But what stood out to you guys?
I
Nothing
did that.
that really. I just had a question about
Yeah.
something. So the Sermon on the Mount, basically saying, if you're, don't brag about what you're doing. If you're fasting, don't, perceive yourself as somebody who's obviously hungry, all the kind of stuff. But it says, truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what he's talking about when he says that?
So that is really saying that like the religious hand clapping, like, oh, you're so spiritual, oh, you're so,
Mm-hmm.
that's their reward. That's the most of what they're getting. They've
Gotcha.
gotten their reward. Those of you who are doing it in secret or like without trying to make a big show of it so that you can be praised, just wait, your reward is not complete yet. Your
Yeah.
reward is the blessing now, and then the blessing after we've died and are with God in heaven. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, I think it kind of says at the bottom of 132 that I highlighted. If your motive is to do something for the appearance of being holy, then you receive your reward. If you miss the point, like if you're looking for human recognition, then that's your reward, not
Mm-hmm.
spiritual things.
Well, now I wrote right next to that, and you're grieving the heart of God. Like, man, if there's anybody I don't want to cause grief to, it's God, right? And I realize I do it all the time with my sin and in my failures and stuff, but like that weighs heavy on me, is this idea of when I live inauthentically, that God just looks at it and goes, why? Like, why? I've made you so special, and I've made you gifted, and I've done so much in your life. Why do you feel like you have to fake it? And it, my kids aren't really old enough or haven't done anything to the level of just, man, you're super disappointed in them. But I know I did that to my own parents at times, and it's just like that's heavy. Like that's the worst thing for me was to think that I let my parents down. So to see that with God is is a heavy thing. What about you, Brandon?
No, nothing really else to add. I mean, just more so just the importance of understanding that you could put on this facade, but I mean, 99 of 100 times that's going to be broken. Somebody's going to see through it. You're going to be exposed, and just like he says in the story with the speaker, yeah, I mean, it's just the importance of not trying to put on a facade.
Yeah, that's good. So for me, it was kind of at the very end, and it kind of leads into the next section. So I'll kind of start with it, and then we'll kind of jump in. But it says the last sentence in this part of top 134 says, "Your faith may be personal, but it's never meant to be private." And I wrote several things here. The first thing is, how do you guys feel about that statement? That your faith may be personal, but it's never meant to be private. And Eric, I specifically want to hear from you because you're a more private person by nature. And he starts getting into this part and living in the light. And again, we've talked about this before that when he was at Watermark is a huge believer in everything goes through your life group. You don't make any big decisions without talking to your life group financially, spiritually, anything, family wise, anything like that, that group is there to challenge and to push you. And so some of that kind of comes through in this, but this statement of your faith may be personal, but it's never private. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I'm definitely a person that doesn't really ask questions or reach out. But if somebody asks me something, even if it's personal, I'll answer it. But the fact, not as far as he goes, where he offers it up, that's probably kind of where I don't match where he's at. But I mean, I'll answer any question, even if it's tough.
So would you say that you don't match because it's uncomfortable, or would you say you don't match because you disagree?
I don't disagree. I think it can be healthy the way he does things. It's just like you said, it's not my personality type,
right?
To start those conversations or offer up that information freely without prompting. I would say that's more my personality type. Not that I disagree. Not that I disagree with how he does it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm honestly, I'm kind of in the same boat. The idea of having a group that you have to literally tell everything that's going on to, I don't know. I know it's probably a really good thing to do, but man, the level of trust and comfort that you'd have to have with that group, like, us, yeah, I would feel comfortable with that. But also, we're spending 3, maybe 4 days out of the week with each other doing something silly or doing this, that we've developed something that I feel comfortable doing that. I mean, I don't know how often like life groups get together, but like we're building something that's, for me, it's been like 2 or 3 years of multiple days a week doing this. I don't know if I could get to, I don't know.
No,
that just seems
no,
very difficult.
That's good. And it leads into another question I got in a second, but let me hear Brandon first. Because Brandon, you've had a really good life group.
Yeah, we've had some good ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still feel like it wasn't as open as he's talking about in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think probably more like Eric. I think it wasn't voluntarily provided, but and we've definitely had some things that questions were asked and things were brought to light and stuff like that would occur, but we didn't have that kind of atmosphere where it was just voluntarily provided just because it was like weighing on somebody's conscience or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and again, that's always been me, right? Up until 9 years ago when I got to Waterbrook, like that was me. I never offered anything up to anybody, and it was just kind of always kept in. What I did offer up was guarded and kind of protected. And then as I've seen it lived out in my own life group and how that's challenged me, and more than anything, how I've grown because of it, that it's. And again, we'll talk about some of that in this next section here. But I guess the question is, do you think there are different purposes for different groups? You know, like, are there things, one of the things I wrote here, are there things in our lives that are meant to be private? I guess that's the first question. Do you think there's things in your life that are meant to be private? And he kind of has his opinion that he talks about in this next section on it, that he would say no. But what about you guys? Are there things in your life that you think are just between you and God, or you and your wife and the Lord, or what? How do you feel about that?
First thing, I don't think anything should be that that inaccessible where it's just you and God. But then when you go beyond the bounds of like your spouse or your wife, and that, like, getting outside to external individuals, that I think there's a filter there.
Okay. Where? Like, give me practical, because I'm gonna hone in on this. Because I can feel the uncomfortableness in the three
No, I'm
squares.
trying to
I can feel the uncomfortableness in all three squares, and I'm really enjoying this.
I'm trying to use something practical, to be honest. Like,
Yep.
I mean, if maybe, I mean, maybe we'll do financial. So maybe like a financial thing that's between, it's only impacting your family. It's your income. It's
Right.
there's no outside impact to it, and it's just something that you and your spouse need to figure out with the Lord and get guidance from God on how to address it, or something like that. I mean, I guess if you needed outside guidance and wisdom, then it would make sense to go get that. But I don't think it would be a requirement to just voluntarily share that information.
So do you think, I'm gonna play devil's advocate because this is the fun part.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think that, if you have somebody, and like, so for you specifically, right, whether it's somebody in this group or your brother, or your parents, that's before you go make a financial decision, you talk about it with them. And it's not like you're saying, hey, should I do this? You're just like throwing it out there to go, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what, like, I'm crossing all my T's and dotting all my I's, right? Like, I'm not missing anything here. And you're justifying it, and you're having the conversation. Like, yes, I know what you're saying, but I think that you would, if you and your wife are trying to make a decision of any significance, right? If you're deciding if you're going to go to dinner tomorrow night, please don't call me because I'm not a good. Okay, I don't care. Are you back in time to play Call of Duty? Like, I don't know. But for bigger things,
Yeah.
I think it would be important to get the wisdom of somebody else in your life. I know you do that, so I think you do something different than what you just said. If you were going to go buy a new house, you may not go line item by line item, but you're going to share it with somebody and go, hey, and if you aren't, I think you should. Somebody you trust. Don't random Joe on the street, right? So somebody that you trust. But and again, we'll get into who that is and what that looks like in a minute. But
yeah, just to that point though, like, so my last recent purchase was the Jeep that I got. That was probably the last big purchase that I made. I didn't really consult anybody else outside of Natalie on whether or not that that purchase is justified, or if we should make that purchase. I mean, yeah, I go back and forth because, I mean, and maybe it's just that I don't have anybody necessarily that I fully trust to help me make that decision. I feel like there would be some sort of bias, no matter who I'm talking to. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, and so, like, for me, part of it is
there would be
fear.
bias, or there would just be a.
There's a fear they're going to tell me what
I.
There's a fear they're going to tell me what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to judge that with bias. Like, there's both sides of it.
Yeah.
That I've got to find the right person that isn't biased, that isn't going to judge me no matter what, and then that I have to be open to them saying, I think this is a terrible idea. What are you thinking? When the reality is I really want it.
Yeah, I think I think bias is definitely one of the fears that I have. But I think probably another one, now that I'm thinking about it, is anybody that I know that I would talk to about that would not be biased, doesn't have all the information that they would need. They're just kind of clueless of my situation, or I
Mhm.
haven't, given that the context or enough information for them to have to
Right.
make a decision. So
Right.
it wouldn't really be a valid decision.
Yeah. Okay. And then to share all that information is again
Hmm.
putting more trust in them, because then you're talking salaries and you're talking all the other payments and you're talking like then you suddenly are a completely open
Budget.
book.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay. But you don't. Okay. It's not that you wouldn't. You just need to find the right person to trust
Yeah,
and then decide whether or not. Okay. Okay.
yeah,
I still
right.
don't think you would, but like not in a bad way, but like yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was a little deranged. All right, Corey. What about you? Are
I
things
mean, so
in your
are we
life are meant to
still
be private?
we're still talking about in the realm of in a community group, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not talking like again,
Okay.
random person confession with your pastor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm talking like within people that you trust the most.
I don't. To me, like if we're talking about finances, why do I need to run my finances by somebody like outside of my wife or so? Like, I don't know. I guess it's your perception on how you. I, I guess I don't see the need. Like, why do
Yeah.
Mhm.
I I have a community group because I want to talk about Jesus. I want to talk about faith. I want to talk about struggles or like if we're just talking about finances. Like, why do I? And again, I'm just we're talking about uh, Watermark. How you said their thing is like you have to do everything through a group
Right.
before you do anything. I guess I just don't see the need.
So I
Like,
guess
why do I need to
my
get?
my pushback would be that it goes back to this wise counsel around you, right?
Mm.
That it protects you to get another person. I'm not saying you have to get it approved by that person, but that you've like if you're getting ready to move jobs, you might talk to your wife, but you probably also talk to one or two other people about like, hey, I'm thinking about this company. What do you know? Or I'm thinking about switching this job. What do you think? Like you're looking for more voices so that your answer has the best foundation to it, so that you have all as much counsel as you can get to make the best decision. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's not like you're basing your answer on someone's decision. Is it you're just trying to get the best foundation you can before you step forward into that decision. So to me, that's the purpose of it. That's what I was trying to say to Brandon that I didn't say very well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
That to me is the purpose. Is you're just trying to get more people speaking into the decision rather than just you and your wife's opinion.
Mm. I think for me, my natural tendency is just to speak with the people that I feel positively or negatively it's going to directly impact them. So like a financial decision, it's really just going to impact my
Right.
own family. I'm
Yeah.
not responsible for anybody else financially. So that's kind of my natural tendency, which whether that's right or wrong, that's naturally where I go.
Yeah. All right,
But
Eric.
I'm also
sorry,
coming
go
at
ahead.
like I guess I've never been in a community group or anything like that. So like
Mhm.
I'm coming at from a perspective like I've never really done it. I don't see
Right.
the need for it.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Eric.
So I would say if we're talking like a community setting or a group you trust setting, to me, if it causes you any level of stress, then it shows wisdom to reach out and ask for advice. But if it, I mean, there's also, I believe scripturally, there are some things that need to be kept between husband and wife as one flesh. Like if if we try something new in the bedroom and it goes really well,
Yeah. Okay. Listen,
Well, you
I
can
was
tell
waiting for
me.
this. I was waiting for this.
Y'all should try this.
Yeah.
No, let's do that.
let me write this down real quick.
No. Okay. No. That's a really good example, though. No.
So,
That I could vouch
uh,
with.
I think to me, if it causes me a level of stress, yes, it does show wisdom to ask for counsel between people you trust and in a group. And if things are going well and people ask you about it, don't be afraid to share. But if you're talking about seeking counsel, I think it definitely if you have a level of stress about something.
That's good. No, that's a really good barometer. That this idea of the stress, right? That if the decision is weighing heavily upon you, then get some other people to speak into it to give you confidence. When I talk to people about walking forward in decisions, that one of the ways that Satan will often attack is to make you doubt that decision, right? But one of the ways you fight back on that, in the way that I tell people, like if you're considering this job or this thing is especially when I talk to people about considering ministry, the things I go to is, have you prayed about it, right? Obviously God's the source. So have you talked to God about it? What do other people say? Are other people confirming this decision, or are they going, well, you're an idiot, what are you thinking? Like, you should not do this. Like, that's a terrible decision. Because again, the people that know you, the people that love you and care about you, are going to be the people that often go, well, yeah, this makes total sense, this is great. So God's going to confirm it, the other people are going to confirm it, and then does it obviously align with scripture and your calling and stuff like that, with what God says. And then those doubts that you have, you can go, well, I have a doubt over here, but all these other things over here confirm it, and I'm confident in it because of this. So then this doubt can't be the thing that has the greatest weight in this decision. These things over here have to. Does that make sense? And so I think that like you said, Eric, that sometimes the stress of that when things weigh heavily on you, that it's that way. And like, so for me, when we bought our house, that I sat down with one of my buddies who has bought and sold houses, and I said, okay, so here's how much it's going to cost. Here's how much we're putting down. Like, what do you think? Do you think, this and that? And it's because I know he has experience. He just bought a house recently. We're looking at it. We're looking at the area. I've done all my research, but I just needed someone else who I knew was experienced, who I knew would be like, oh, and he goes, I think it's a great investment. And I think it's a great thing. Yeah, it puts you at the top of what you can afford, and it kind of stretches you all a little bit and makes you a little uncomfortable. But I think you've prayed about it. I think that you've sought after. These are the questions I would have if I was making the decision. And then, you've given me answers to all those things. I think there's a lot of wisdom in pursuing it. Okay, like I needed someone else to kind of walk through that with me. Now, some of it too is, and I talk about this a lot in my premarital counseling, that I am a verbal processor, so I need other people to talk things out with other people, to process things. My wife is the opposite. She's a silent processor, so we talk, and then she needs to kind of go off on her own and sit in it and process it and then come back. So I know that some of that's a little bit weighted because of who I am as a processor. But and I guess part of the question too, and I think this is important to understand our context, that as a culture, as Americans especially, we, and I guess it's more statement. I don't need to ask this question, but because to me this is just a statement, is as Americans, we consider some things, I would quote, personal, that other places don't. Culturally, there are business, finances, sex life, like some basic things that we go, no, that's personal, that's private. And as a culture, we've decided that those are not things that should be shared. But I don't know if that's scriptural. Does that make sense? So that's my pushback. I think it's more culture than it is scripture with that. Does that rub anybody the wrong way? Does that?
No, that makes sense.
Corey's still processing. Corey's the silent processor. But I think what Eric said.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I don't have anything to add. Nothing constructive.
Yeah, but I think what Eric said, that stress level is a really good test to go, oh, okay, this decision's heavier. Again, what are you gonna eat for dinner tonight? I don't care. But bigger decisions, I actually love having those conversations with people. I love it. I feed off of that stuff. To go, let's sit down and look at it. Like I got a buddy of mine that's talking about starting his own company and this and that. I said, okay. I said, for here pretty soon, let's get together for like 2 hours. Let's go through your every like bill you've got. Let's go through your mortgage. Let's go through your car. Let's go through all this stuff to figure out, for you to do this, how much is it going to cost? This and that. Like, there's just a fact that sometimes we need to do that with somebody else, with another set of eyes. And it doesn't mean that's always the case, but there's value in that if you trust that person. So the other thing I had in here was just the general question: do you have people, in your life you can or do share everything with, and if not, why? So Corey, I guess for you, what has been the challenge to having those relationships in your life over the years?
I don't know. We've discussed this in the past, and Brandon and I are kind of the same. I don't know. We just don't really want to meet people, I guess. I don't know.
Right?
Which it
Yeah.
sounds
No,
so
no, no. I
bad.
totally get it.
No, it really shouldn't be that way.
I don't need any more
I
friends.
mean,
I'm good.
kudos to you, Brandon. You're doing better than me. Uh, but I don't know. It's not a problem, but my wife's the same way. She doesn't want to
Yeah.
meet people, probably even more so than I do. So
Yeah. My wife doesn't get that choice.
yeah, I'm the social one of us too.
Yeah.
So
Oh gosh.
it's pretty bad.
What about you, Eric, Corey, or Eric and Brandon?
I'll go again.
If not-
Like it's the same. I'm just kidding.
If you don't have that, why not over the years? Why have those relationships been challenging?
I think for me, if I think about it, I think I do have those people in my life. I just don't think of it in that way.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't consider them people that I just naturally would go to and open up in those ways.
Right.
Even though I know that if I did, it would be received well. I know that I would probably get good wisdom from those individuals.
Yeah. It goes back to what you first
It's
said,
not a
which
habit.
is you're not the one that's going to initially start that
Right.
conversation. But if someone
Right.
else starts it, you don't mind jumping in on it, going, "Hey,
Yeah.
like no, this is important to me too."
Or if somebody asked a question about something, I wouldn't mind talking about it. But it's those people that I just don't volunteer the information. But I know that there's people in my life. I mean, I could think of several probably.
What about you, Eric?
I would say I haven't really reached out for those type of relationships outside of my family. I think part of it is because I feel that that need is pretty well met within different parts of my family.
Mhm.
I don't feel the need to. I'm not. I don't have a void to fill. I
Yeah.
don't feel I have a void to fill outside of my family. 'Cause I have different sides, points of advice that I get from all different points of my family. But man, joining this group, I think was a reaching out step for me to kind of get more of that. So, but that's kind of how I feel. A lot of that need is met within my own family, but I do have, friends outside, at the church and at work and
Mhm.
stuff. So
No, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I guess I want to clarify, kind of like what Eric was saying. Like you guys, I do feel comfortable with.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
It's again, it's one of those situations like what Brandon was saying. Like it's not that I don't want to tell y'all anything. I don't know. I mean, John, obviously you're the best one out of all of us for just telling us everything, but like, I don't know. If you ask, I'll tell. But like, I don't know. I've just never been in a mindset. Be like, oh man, let me text the guy. Like I'm struggling with this. Let me tell everybody. I don't know. I've just never.
Yeah.
I really should. But
So what I've
don't
learned
know.
is that y'all are gonna start getting that random text. Hey, I'm dealing with this. You idiots. What
Yeah.
are you dealing with? Tell me now, or I'm coming over. I'm gonna open up my checkbook and start talking to your spouse about where you spend your finances. You better tell me.
let's review my budget.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And obviously I am a very I've kind of switched from what I used to be and super closed off and guarded and not let anybody in. And man, I'm a better husband. I'm a better dad. I'm a better pastor. I'm a better human. I'm a better worshiper of God, all because of these couple of men that have been in my life over the last 8 years at the church, that now I desire that for everybody. Like it is truly like I want that for everybody so bad because it has changed my life. And I've called them up, and I've shared this story before in a sermon, I think, but I called up a buddy of mine one time and I was mad. Like I was mad at my wife and I was frustrated about some stuff. And I called him up and he was like, yeah, have you done this? And I was like, well, no. And he goes, well, you can't blame her until you do this, until you go talk to her about this. And I was like, well, shut up. I didn't want to hear that. Like, that's not what I wanted to hear in the moment. But like, that was the wise counsel I needed to go, no, like, why are you complaining when you haven't gone to the source in the first part, and you haven't shared, you haven't talked about it, you haven't done this and that. I was like, oh man, that was really good. I really should do that, shouldn't I? And then I did, and that was like, oh well, this was actually really good to have this conversation because it created a better relationship with me and my wife, and it created more openness and more honesty and all. Again, everything was better. And I was like, oh well, that was really wise of this person to say that. I don't say it a lot, but it was really good in that moment. So, like, I want that for other people. So like, I just now I just poke the bear and I try and say things and do things, and I don't. I guess it's because I'm getting old, Eric. Thank you for that. I just don't care anymore. Like I'm just gonna. I was meeting with a guy the other day, and just straight up asked like some questions on, I knew kind of some past stuff, and was like, listen, are you looking at pornography? When's the last time? When was the? I mean, just like really bold and direct. There was no beating around the bush. It was just boom, and it was, and you could tell he was like, man, he even said, he goes, I haven't had these kind of conversations with men in forever, and I need this, and so I appreciate it. And I was like, oh, okay, well that's cool. Well, I guess I'll keep going then. And so yeah, but that's part of my job, right, as a pastor, is to do that. But okay, all right. Oh, sorry, my monitor changed there. That's why it looks a little different. The red glow of.
Oh my
All right.
gosh, nuclear warhead going off.
Okay, I was gonna make a joke, but it would have been inappropriate. All right. So we get into this these last couple sections, but what kind of stood out with you with the living the light? I had a whole bunch of things in this one, but I've talked a bunch, so. And maybe we actually don't need to hit this first one, because this was kind of what we just talked about, the kind of the, y'all aren't going to be the ones offering it, but it wouldn't mean that you wouldn't bring it into light. You just may need some starter questions to kind of get going and to have this conversation. Now, I'm not to the point that I could admit some things like he did on stage yet. But at the same time, I had somebody come up to me at the last time I preached, and he said, God, what did he say? He said something like, I've never gotten this compliment before. It really meant a lot. But he said, like, that was, he talking about how much he feels like my preaching has grown and this and that. But he said, you were really self-deprecating, but really authentic. And I really connected with that. It was an older gentleman, like somebody my parents' age or older. And he goes, and I really appreciated that. It's like, that's the best compliment I could get, is that someone was like, no, I really felt like you showed us who you were. And that's a part of my preaching style, is to tell times that I failed, to tell times that I screwed up. And usually because it gets a laugh out of people, but also because I just feel like it lets them identify with me as a person, to go, I'm absolutely no better than anybody else in this room. All right, so what about this last question? These 3 helpful questions. How did you feed your soul? Have you fed others? And have you fed your flesh? What do you guys think about those questions?
Those are
And
great
these are
questions.
Yeah, these are
Yeah.
questions that he has as a part of accountability with his group.
Yeah, I like those questions. I think that would be good. And that's, yeah, if you had a group of men that you met with weekly, that's like the perfect starter questions for that.
Mm-hmm. Eric, what'd you think?
Yeah, those first 2, like, how did you feed your? If you ask yourself those questions at the end of the day, how did you feed your soul today, and how did you feed others today? That's like, oh my gosh, I didn't do any of that today.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a thought-provoking questions, beginning and the end of the day. Like, if you ask yourself those questions at the beginning of the day, what is your how will your goals change for that day?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you ask yourself those questions at the end of the day, it's like, you think back and like, oh man, I was bad today. I didn't do either of those things.
Yeah.
So definitely good questions to ask yourself. And, in the third one, how have you fed your flesh? You think back on your day, and, what little or big sins did you commit that you just brushed past in your mind, and you need to go back and ponder on and ask for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and I liked it that they don't all have to be. I think so often as men, especially, we always go to like sexual sins, like because those are the ones that often linger the longest, have the most devastating impact. Like those are the ones that, when somebody, certainly when I was in high school and somebody's preaching about sin, it's like all I can think about is those stupid things I've done. And but what I really appreciate about these is they're so much deeper than that. It's not did you lust this week? Like no, it's how have you fed your flesh? Well, that can be yes, sexual sin, but it can also be did you are you working on working out and you just totally slacked off this week and you ate whatever you wanted? Like God's called you to do this and to challenge you in this and you kind of didn't do that, or have you you made a accountability that you were going to only watch this many hours of social media or Netflix or whatever it was, and you totally gave into those things and you watched 4 times the amount or whatever. Like there's so many ways of that feeding your flesh that can go. That's really, really good. Anybody else got any thoughts on those or in that section?
I mean, the last thing I had in this chapter was that verse on 136, 1 John. Just a really encouraging, thought-provoking verse. If we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ purifies us from all sin. Just kind of a great summary of the chapter.
And what I love about that actually goes into what I highlighted on 137. He says, but if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. That's what I highlighted in 137 was a commitment to absolute transparency and authenticity only happens in community with other believers. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about people getting back into church physically, is because we need to be around other believers. God didn't design us to do this alone, but we need to be physically around other people and then have people in our lives that are speaking truth to us. That the only way that we can become transparent and authentic in every part of our life and build that trust is with other people. And the only way you do that with other people is time. That's the only way that it works. You don't build relationships without time. And that time can be anything, right? It can be Call of Duty. I didn't meet Corey for a year and a half or whatever before. I tell people all the time, like, it's such a good example because we played this game for a year and a half or whatever before I ever met him in person. But I knew about his wife. I knew about his kid. I knew about health issues in his family. I knew about all these things. And I didn't know what the guy looked like. And there can be some of that community. But that community, the test of the community is ultimately, is there transparency and is there authenticity in it for it to be real community that helps you be discipled? Anybody else?
Who's going to buy us tickets to Game 5 so we can meet in person?
Let's see. I haven't looked at the score. All right.
No,
My last
I
thing on
forgot.
this. Before Eric takes us off the rails here, I have on 138. It says I've forfeited the right to privacy, and he says in my mind I've forfeited the right to privacy, and I'm committed to that. And what I wrote in it was, as a pastor, this is a really important statement to me, that I can't expect to lead well if I'm not authentically leading myself. And I wrote down here, good leadership in every arena of life must include authenticity. That starts with a group that knows it all, and it includes me owning my mistakes and failures and shortcomings, even if it costs me at times. And so just back to that idea that to truly grow in my faith and to lead well, lead my family well, lead my wife well, lead in my job well, to lead in all areas of my life, I have to be someone who's authentic. And the only way I can be authentic is to have people around me that know me, that I can be honest and open with, so that Satan doesn't get a foothold in any part of my life. So, cool. All right. Well, y'all go look at the Ranger score since Eric hopefully hinted at a comeback. I'm going to pull it up here in just a second. No? God, this team is irritating.
It was like 8 to 4.
8 to 4.
It was like 8 to 4 in the
yeah,
7th. So
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know.
No, it's
Maybe,
over.
man. Listen, Jesus came back after nobody thought he was coming back, and he did. All right. You never know what happens.
Man,
Yeah.
Well.
The Rangers are not Jesus. We know that much. We've seen that before. But all right, sweet. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Yeah, flip over to the other thing. All right. Well, that is it for that part 7. Thank you for joining. He did speak some fact there, didn't he? Thanks for hanging out with us. I appreciate it. That is going to be that part of it on YouTube. So if you were watching on YouTube, let me end it. And see you next week. And if you're on Twitch,